Aristotle of Stagira was a Greek philosopher who developed the first systematic, scientific study in virtually every area of human knowledge. In his time, he was known famously as the Philosopher and needed no other qualification as his fame had spanned so widely. Prior to him, the concept of metaphysics did not exist. He created it when he published his book on metaphysical speculation after writing a book on physics. Plato was a student of Socrates, and Aristotle studied under Plato. The student and teacher had a fundamental disagreement on Plato's philosophy, the insistence of a higher realm of forms that made objective reality possible. Even though some scholars claim this caused a rift between them, it didn't. Aristotle would develop on Plato's ideas in order to further his own creative thinking, despite the fact that he rejected Plato's theory of forms. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Stagira, Greece, on the border of Macedonia. Aristotle's father, Nicomachus, served as the court physician to the Macedonian king and passed away when Aristotle was just 10. Aristotle, as the son and nephew of Pallas Staff, was most likely educated at the Macedonian court, but this is unconfirmed. Aristotle was 18 when he went to Athens to study at Plato's academy. He stayed there for the next 20 years. He excelled as a student, graduating early and landing a job teaching rhetoric and dialogue at the university. After Plato's death, it appears that Aristotle intended to take over the academy and seize control of it after Speusippus, Plato's nephew, was elected. He departed Athens to pursue research and experiment on his own in the Greek archipelago islands. In 343 BCE, King Philip II of Macedon summoned Aristotle to teach his son Alexander. After 7 years tutoring the prince, in 336 BCE Alexander became king and began his now famous conquests. By 335 BCE, Aristotle had returned to Athens, and the two men continued to communicate through correspondence. The conqueror's mastery of difficult political issues throughout his career may be attributed to Aristotle's influence on him. Scholars believe that Alexander the Great's love of reading and carrying books with him on military campaigns was inspired by Aristotle. Furthermore, it is speculated that Aristotle also influenced Alexander's appreciation for art and culture. Alexander was encouraged to conquer the Persian Empire by Aristotle, who despised non-Greek barbarians and Persians in particular. As with most Greeks, Aristotle would have heard stories of the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, the Persian invasion of 480 BCE, and Greek victories at Salamis and Plataea. Considering the anti-Persian sentiments of his culture, it is unsurprising that he advocated for conquest. On top of this, Aristotle was philosophically pro-war because it offered a chance for excellence and the application of one's particular talent to complex, difficult problems. Aristotle claims that happiness is the main, natural goal for human life and all living beings, which can be achieved by having a good character and doing virtuous deeds. Moreover, by befriending honorable people who shared the same goal, an individual's integrity improved and skills sharpened. Also, campaigning gave numerous chances to individuals not only validate their own importance, but also display heroic feats. Prior to the commencement of Alexander's campaign in 336 BCE, he would have inspired him with ideas like these. After coming back to Athens in 335 BCE, Aristotle established his own school, the Lyceum, which opposed Plato's academy. Aristotle was a teleologist, someone who believes in end causes and ultimate objectives in life, and held that everything and everyone on earth has a function. Plato, who also talked about the origins and final purposes of things, considered them more idealistically and believed they could be known by understanding a higher invisible plane of truth he called the realm of forms. The philosophy of Plato was founded on the Pythagorean mysticism of the pre-Socratic philosopher and mystic Pythagoras, as established by his school, the Pythagorean school. Pythagoras believed that the soul is immortal and virtues are important. He thought there were many truths in life that everyone must know and follow to live a good life. Another pre-Socratic philosopher, the sophist Protagoras, is credited with being an early relativist thinker who had a significant influence on Plato. Protagoras was famous for maintaining that, of all things, a man is the measure, meaning that everyone has their own perspective, and that determines what truth is for them. Protagoras argued that, because all observable phenomenon or emotional or psychological experiences are subject to an individual's interpretation, there can be no objective truth in any given situation. Plato believed that objective reality exists, and he developed his theory of forms in order to refute Protagoras' subjectivism. Aristotle never agreed with Plato's theory of forms because he thought it was unnecessary to posit the existence of something one couldn't see when trying to explain what could be observed. The first cause, according to Aristotle, is the prime mover in the cosmos, that which moves all else but is itself unmoved. To Aristotle, this made more sense than the realm of forms. Aristotle believes that what make a horse beautiful are the characteristics that humans perceive as being visually appealing: an attractive coat color, good health, and excellent form. To claim that a horse is beautiful because it escapes human perception and logic was untenable to Aristotle, since any assertion must be backed up with evidence in order to be accepted. At some point in the past, something set life in motion. Aristotle referred to this as the unmoved mover or prime mover. His ideas on this subject would be later adopted by religious leaders of many faiths and helped shape their views of God. It was with a heavy heart that Aristotle rejected Plato's theory, as he still held great respect for his former teacher. Plato argued that it was not possible to develop an understanding of abstract truths from real-world experience, and therefore nothing could be truly learned. Most notably, he argues that all learning is a form of memory from a past life. Aristotle believed that knowledge was not simply innate, but could be taught and learned. He argued that this was evident in the way people's perceptions and behavior changed after they were exposed to new information. Aristotle argued that a good man is good because he has been taught the value of living a virtuous life. If a person could only remember essential truths from a past life, they would not be considered good themselves. The virtue of a human being is the result of that person making the conscious decision to behave in a certain way and continuously practicing virtuous habits, regardless of what others think. Aristotle once wrote, "Honor is often given by others instead of being self-generated, whereas we believe that good therapeutic techniques are based on a solid relationship with the client which cannot be easily taken away." According to Aristotle, part of leading a good life is monitoring everything we do so that we can be content and happy. This happiness cannot be taken away by any outside force. To Aristotle, justice is achieved by acting justly and exercising self-control, the golden mean. He writes, "When it comes to pain and pleasure, the happy medium is self-control, while too much or too little indulgence leads to unhappiness. The same can be said about spending money. Being stingy causes as much misery as being wasteful. People who spend too much money and those who don't spend enough both have issues with excess and deficiency. The former exceeds in spending while the latter doesn't take enough, whereas a stingy person does the opposite by exceeding in taking but falling short when it comes to spending. By using the golden mean, we can keep our behavior in check. If we know that we tend to be excessive, then we should moderate our behavior and become more frugal. Oftentimes, people spend money without thinking twice. However, if you make a concerted effort to not spend any money at all, you will find yourself spending moderately instead of going to either extreme." The Peripatetic school, also known as the Lyceum, was where Aristotle taught his students the golden mean and other precepts. It got its name from Aristotle's habit of walking around while he talked. Out of all his students, Aristotle was fondest of Theophrastus, who later took over as the school's leader and published a collection of Aristotle's works. Allegedly, Aristotle's work that survives wasn't intended for publication, but was just lecture notes. Theophrastus and other people who admired the content a great deal had copied and distributed it. The golden mean is one of Aristotle's most celebrated additions to philosophical thought, though it is important to remember that this only pertained to ethics. In fact, Aristotle was knowledgeable in every branch available during his time. In order to achieve the greatest happiness, he argued that people should try to live life with as many voluntary actions as possible. He understood that there were many mundane chores and responsibilities in life which we would rather not do, but he suggested viewing these apparent annoyances as opportunities for happiness. For example, one might not want to do the dishes. Aristotle would suggest looking at cleaning the dishes as a means to having a clean kitchen and clean plates for the next meal, which is the desirable end. It can be hard to see the silver lining when you're stuck in a job you hate. But it's important to remember that your job is what allows you to live comfortably and enjoy all of life's other pleasures. Instead of dwelling on the negative, try to focus on all the ways your job contributes to your happiness. A number of authors throughout the 20th and 21st centuries have brought to light the importance gratitude and positive thinking hold, but Aristotle was an advocate of this perspective long before then. In On the Soul, Aristotle waterfronts the idea that our memories act as imprints of past events rather than factual accounts of what truly transpired. Our memories hold different values as we gain new experiences. For example, if you had an unpleasant memory of a car accident, but it led you to meeting the love of your life, then that memory would change. People store memories based on the emotional story they are telling themselves and others. Even though this idea has been explored by Freud and Jung, it was not originally their own thoughts. In his work, Politics, Aristotle explores the idea of the state as an organic development that is natural to any community of human beings. He argues that the state is not a static structure imposed on people but a dynamic, living entity created by those who then live under its rules. Long before Thomas Hobbes wrote about the burden of government or Jean-Jacques Rousseau developed his social contract, Aristotle had already addressed their same concerns. Aristotle's Poetics not only introduced new concepts of literary criticism, such as mimesis and catharsis, to the world, but also influenced the creative arts. His observations about poetic and rhetorical form were considered objective truths that continued to be taught during the European Renaissance. Aristotle was always curious about everything related to humans and the natural world. If he wanted to learn more about a subject, he would not stop until he had mastered it. After that, he would try to explain it in a way that made sense philosophically. By testing hypotheses through experiments that could be repeated, he eventually developed the scientific method in its early form. After Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, people living in Athens started to view Macedon negatively. Aristotle was then charged with being impious because of his past association with Alexander and the Macedonian court. With the unjust execution of Socrates in mind, Aristotle chose to flee Athens, lest the Athenians sin twice against philosophy, as he said. He died of natural causes a year later in 322 BCE. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe.